Hello, everyone. Welcome to this author-led video walkthrough for the first chapter of the new Earth Engine book. This is going to be a gentle introduction to JavaScript and Earth Engine API. If you've never coded before, if you're new to Earth Engine, this is the chapter to start. And I'll be walking you through some theory and some practical. So we first start with a slide showing just the overview of this session today. We'll cover some theory. This is useful to allow you to orient yourself on some terminology, like what is an API, why we are doing what we are doing, and then how Earth Engine processes data. And once we do that, we're going to dive into a practical session where we're going to open up Earth Engine code editor, type some code, and I'm going to teach you the basics of programming and how to do your basic programming within the Earth Engine environment. So today you're going to learn about the Earth Engine code editor environment, how to type code, how to run code, how to save your script, and generally find your way around the Earth Engine code editor. At the end of this video, you're going to be familiar with Earth Engine. You're going to be able to write some JavaScript. That's the language we'll be programming in. And you'll be able to know how to find the Earth Engine API functions and maybe use a few of them. We already assume that you have signed up for Earth Engine account. If not, you can go to earthengine.google.com and follow the instructions to sign up for an account. Once you sign up, you will receive instructions to how to access the Earth Engine code editor. So once that is done, you come back here and you can review, you can start working on this chapter. So let's start working on understanding a few terminology. Earth Engine is a very different kind of platform. It allows you to process very large amounts of data in a distributed environment. Why Earth Engine is so great and why a lot of you want to learn it is because Earth Engine has access to massive amounts of data. Earth Engine hosts terabytes of data in the data center. All the data that you need for your analysis is already there. You don't have to download and process it. And if you've tried doing this on your computer, you know that when you process large amounts of data, just using your single CPU on your machine takes a long time. It's very painful. Doing remote sensing on a desktop has always been very painful. And to avoid this, Earth Engine also distributes your computation across a large pool of machines. So you have access to literally thousands of machines that Earth Engine will distribute your computation and you'll be able to process your data. If you try writing code for all of this yourself, it's going to be, you need to be a very good computer scientist. It's going to be very, very hard. And that's what Earth Engine API simplifies it for you. Earth Engine provides you with an API that allows you to specify what you want to do, and it distributes that computation in on the Google servers across large pool of machines and allows you to get the data. And that's what Earth Engine API is. So what's an API? If you're new to this term, you might have heard that this term stands for Application Programming Interface. That's just a fancy way of saying the API allows you to communicate with the Earth Engine servers. It allows you to specify what you want to do. Earth Engine will understand that. It'll say, I'll figure out the best way to distribute your computation. I'll figure out how to get the data you need. It'll do all the work. It'll compile all the results and send it back. You don't have to worry about how it does it. You just have to say, I want this, and the API will take care of how to make that happen. And this greatly simplifies how you use the platform, and you can leverage the full potential of this large computation that is available to you. Google provides you with this API in two languages, the JavaScript API. So JavaScript is a programming language. It's a language of the web. If you run any apps on a web browser, those are written in JavaScript. Python, a lot of you might be familiar with Python. Python is a language of choice for data scientists. And Google provides you with APIs for both of these languages. There are community efforts that provides APIs for R language as well as Julia. So if you work with any of these languages, you'll be able to use Earth Engine. This chapter and most of this book uses JavaScript API. And at this point, somebody might be thinking, why JavaScript? Out of all these languages, why are we learning JavaScript to use the Earth Engine API? Well, JavaScript is the oldest and most mature of the APIs. It was the first to be made available by Google. So there is a huge corpus of documentation, code examples, so available already. So if you're stuck at a problem, it's likely that you'll find a code example in JavaScript API that solves your problem. It's also very easy to access because JavaScript is the API, is the language of the web. So Google provides you with a code editor. It's a website you go through, and you have this environment within your web browser, which just runs your code and runs Earth Engine without you having to install anything. That means you can actually use Earth Engine from even a very modest computer. You just need a browser. I have done demos of Earth Engine from my mobile device. Just open a mobile browser, you can still run a petabyte scale computation, right? So this is the advantage of using the JavaScript API that allows you to run this computation without any installation from any computing environment. The code editor also gives you this functionality to display your results. Many times when doing analysis, you want to see a chart, you want to see a map, and all of this is available right in the code editor. In the other environment, you have to pull in some other third-party tools to be able to display this. It's just generally a little bit harder. In JavaScript, it's right there. This is the most important, according to me, that when you're learning Earth Engine, you will invariably have problems. You may want to ask for help from your colleagues, from the community, and the code editor in the JavaScript API makes it very, very simple to ask for help. You are working on your code, you have some things working, some things not working, you have some errors. You click one button, it generates a URL. You can share that URL with anybody. They will exactly see what you were seeing at the time you click that button. And that means they can reproduce your problem very easily. They can change, maybe somebody's trying to help you. They'll just say, oh, you forgot this comma. They add the comma, click that button again, send you an updated link, and now have a working code. There's very less friction in sharing code, and it makes learning much, much easier. In other environments, that's going to be much harder. Another big thing is when you do your analysis, many of you will be using Earth Engine for your research, and you did this research and you had some results that you want to show to people. Earth Engine JavaScript API also allows you to create apps very easily. You can create apps which have buttons, drop downs, a map, an interactive mapping environment, which you can publish on the Earth Engine on Google Cloud, free of cost, and anybody can interact with the data and app very easily. So you can actually create an interactive mapping app with just a few lines of code. And that is, again, that is another thing that is much harder in other languages. So that's why most people suggest using JavaScript API to get started. And I might have convinced a few of you, but people who've been doing Python or R or other programming, you still might be wondering, but I don't like JavaScript. Why do I have to learn JavaScript? And I was like you when I started learning Earth Engine quite a while ago. I not only don't like JavaScript, I hate JavaScript. I don't like how the language is structured. I prefer Python. And I was like, I'm not learning JavaScript to use Earth Engine. And I delayed learning Earth Engine for a long time because of that. And I regret it because I quickly realized that you're not learning JavaScript. As I mentioned, you are learning the Earth Engine API. That's the goal. You want to know how you can translate your remote sensing workflow into Earth Engine API. JavaScript is simply the medium on how to call that API. And that requires a very, very basic knowledge of JavaScript. You just need to know how to define a few variables, how to write a function, and then how to call the functions of the API. And that's it. You don't really need to know anything more than that to use Earth Engine. The majority of the time, all the time that we're spending after today is learning the API, not learning JavaScript. And the API is the same, regardless of language. So once you learn the API, you can say, I know how to do this in Earth Engine, and maybe I want to automate this now. I want to use it in my environment that I'm familiar with. I will take it to RStudio, or I want to write in my Jupyter notebook. You can easily transform your JavaScript code into the different languages just by find and replace. It's just very syntactical changes, right? Because the API is the same in all the languages, right? So what we're going to learn today is just the basics of JavaScript to be able to use the Earth Engine API. Another thing to drive home is some of you might say, oh, JavaScript, I do like JavaScript. I'm an expert in JavaScript. I've used JavaScript, I've built apps, so I would be really good at Earth Engine, right? No, because even if you know JavaScript, you can't really use it in the Earth Engine environment. Because all computation, even the simplest thing, like if you want to add two numbers, you cannot use JavaScript. You have to use the Earth Engine API. So anything more complex, you have to use Earth Engine API, not JavaScript. So not only being an expert in JavaScript will not help you, it may actually hinder you. You're working with Earth Engine. So the key point I would take away is focus on the API, focus on learning how to do things the Earth Engine way, learn how Earth Engine is set up. The language is secondary. And I'm going to teach you the very basics of JavaScript that you need to know to be able to work with Earth Engine. All right, so we'll start with the section where we'll do coding. I'm going to run you through the chapter, the topics that I covered in the chapter through the code editor. So the first step is, since this is the very first chapter and you might be just getting started with the book, all of the book's code is available in this repository. The repository is projects/gee-edu-book. So the first step for all of you is you have your Earth Engine account, you verify that you have access, then you click on this link. And when you click on this link, you'll end up with an environment like this. You can see the link here. This is the link to the Google Earth Engine code editor. So the URL code.earthengine.google.com. This is the Earth Engine code editor URL. You can visit this URL anytime, sign in with your account, and you'll start using Earth Engine. The last part here has to be done just once. You have to just do this link once, and after you do this, you'll see a new repository under your readers tab. You can see there is owners, readers, writers, etc. Once you click it, when you expand your readers section, you will see this repository called projects GE-edu book. And this has got all the code examples that are in the book. So for all the chapters, and this has to be done once. Once you do this, you can, next time, you just go and say, I'm going to go to the code editor. This is the URL, and you can end up in the code editor. And your repository will always be there, and you can get the code from that. So today, I want to spend the time going through the basics of JavaScript. First, we'll go through the basics of JavaScript language, just learning about how to define variables, print things, etc. And then we'll move on to the Earth Engine API. So let's do this part. First, a bit of orientation around this environment. This is a code editor. Here, this is divided into different sections. At the middle, you have this section, which is a place where you write the code. So this is where you type your commands. And when you type it, you click this run button that you see at the top. This is the run button. You click this run button, and all the code you typed will get executed, and you'll see the result. If your code asked for an image for a map, you'll see those results coded at the map below. So below this form, you have a map. And this is where you'll see your results, which are geospatial in nature. So a map, an image, etc. will display here. If your code asked Earth Engine to construct a chart, say a time series chart, it will appear here on the console. If you ask for a number, tell me how many square kilometers of crop area is in this region. You'll get those results here. On the left is the scripts tab. This is where you'll access the code for this book, as well as where you'll save your code. So when you write some code, you can hit the save button here. And when you click save, this is going to go to your repository here, which is linked with your account. It's saved privately in your Earth Engine account, similar to how a file is saved in Google Drive. It's a cloud-hosted file. So when you save a file, it goes here. The next time you open this tab in another computer or another time, your file will still be there. Right? A word of warning, the very first time you do this, you'll be asked. So when let's type some code first. So I'm going to type this code called print hello world. This is a simple command. Generally, when you learn a new programming language, you learn how to say hello world. And in JavaScript, saying hello world is simple as calling the print function. A print is the function, is a built-in function, and you call the function with round brackets. So here I have round brackets, and I have given it a text with a single quote saying hello world. And in JavaScript, you end each statement with a semicolon. This tells JavaScript that my statement is now over. I consider this as a full command. So once you do this, you can click run. So I'll click run, and you can see this is the code. It got executed by Earth Engine, and the output is provided here on the console, and it says hello world. Okay, so this is a simple way to say type text in Earth Engine. You can change this text. So I'll say hello readers. And I click run again, and you'll see the output changes. Okay, so this function takes the input, prints the output of the console. And once you've done this, you can click save, and you'll be, the very first time you do this, you'll be prompted to say, choose your home folder. And the home folder is when you save your script, it's saved into a folder with your name, account name on the Google Cloud. And here you can see my username is Ujaval Gandhi. This is what it's asking you. The very first time you click save, it's going to ask you to choose a username. Just be careful. Once you choose a username, you can never change it. It will always be associated with your Earth Engine account. Even the Earth Engine team cannot change it. So don't make it testing 1, 2, 3, even if you're testing Earth Engine, right? Choose a username that reflects your account. And once you do this, you'll be asked to create a repository. A repository is where you can save your code. You can have multiple repositories. You can see I have different repositories, ideally one repository for project. I have different courses, so I have one repository for each course, etc. And you can have multiple scripts inside of that. You can choose a name like default. This is where all my default stuff go, all the random stuff I'm working on, not related to a specific project, and you can keep saving your stuff there. So you can click save, and you'll have your very first line of code. So now let's learn about JavaScript. We learned a little bit basics where you say that JavaScript has functions and you can call them. JavaScript also needs a semicolon at the end. But let's start at the very beginning. When you're learning a new language, the first thing you need to know is something called variables. Variables are a programming constructs where you store some values and then you can retrieve them later by name. And this is a kind of basic building block. So before you can kind of type programs, you need to create variables and use them. So in JavaScript, we create variables using this keyword called var. So you type var, you define the name of the variable, and you can assign it some value. So let's create a variable. We're going to create a variable called city. So we want to create a variable for city, and we want to assign it some value. Let's say we are preparing some data for San Francisco. We want to assign it the name San Francisco to this variable. Okay. This statement, this command says, take the text San Francisco, assign it to the variable city, and end of command, semicolon. And I can check what's the value of the variable city. So I can say print city, and it should print me the value of that variable. So click run here, and you can see it prints San Francisco. It doesn't print city because city is a variable name which has got a value. It prints the value that is stored in the variable name. Okay, so if you have a name without quotes, JavaScript considers that a variable. If you have anything that is within quotes, it considers as a value. Many people ask, do I use single quotes or double quotes? Anything is fine. JavaScript accepts both single quotes and double quotes as valid. So you can choose to use whichever. It's purely a matter of preference. There is no advantage of one way or the other. Some people may have strong preference. If you're working with a colleague and a colleague says, I've been using Earth Engine for a long time. I like single quotes. You must use single quotes. Not a bad idea to use single quotes. For a good project, you should keep things consistent. So my only tip with quotes is be consistent. If you're using double quotes, use double quotes everywhere. If you're using single quotes, use single quotes everywhere. Right. So here we assigned a variable. We created a variable called city and assigned it a text value. You can also create a variable and assign it some numbers. So let's create a variable called population and assign it a number. So this is the population of San Francisco, and we can print that. It prints the value. If you're programming different other language before, you might have noticed that you don't have to tell JavaScript beforehand what is the type of the variable. JavaScript variables take the type of whatever is assigned to them. So if you assign this text, it becomes a text variable. If you assign it an integer, it becomes an integer variable. So variables don't have to be declared before that. So you use variables to store different values in your program and to build your script. So once you know the variables, you might be thinking, it's good to store a single value, but many of my programming tasks will require storing multiple values. So how do we store multiple values? Well, one way that JavaScript provides you is something called a list. Okay, so let's create a list. So I'm going to create a new variable called cities. And I'm going to assign it a list of values. List is created using square brackets in JavaScript. So when you're creating a list, you first create square brackets and you put values inside it separated by comma. So let's put multiple things. Let's put this value San Francisco, comma, Los Angeles, comma, New York, comma, China. Okay. So we have now stored 4 cities names inside this variable called cities. Let's print it and see what happens. Another tip is if you want to speed up your workflow in Earth Engine, there's a shortcut to run your script. I'm going to quickly show this here. This is called Control plus Enter. So if you press Control and Enter, it's going to run your script, and I'm going to use that from now on. I'm going to put 2 forward slashes next to it. If you put any 2 forward slashes in front of anything, JavaScript considers this a comment, so it doesn't interpret that it's a command. It's for your own documentation. I'm going to use this comment here to kind of say things which are not part of the code. So I press Control Enter, and it runs this here. And you can see it says this is a list of 4 elements. And I'm going to expand this to see what's inside. Okay. And I expand this little triangle thing. It's called a zippy. You expand this, and you see there are 4 things inside of it. And this is what we created here. This one has this number 0, 1, 2, 3 next to it. These are called index. So index means what is the position of the item within that list. So in JavaScript, counting starts from 0. So the first item is at index 0, which is San Francisco. Los Angeles is second, so it's index 1. New York is index 2, and Atlanta is index 3. So if you put stuff in a list and you want to take it out, you need to know what was the index of that item. And once you know the index, you can extract that stuff out of it. So this is one way to put multiple things together. There's another way to put multiple things together. And one of the problems with list is you just put stuff in, but you really have to remember the index of each item if you want to recall them. This is great for kind of list of things, unstructured data. But if you have structured data, you may want to say, I'm creating this data. I know I have a name for each item, and I want to use the name to extract value later on. So if you have structured data, a better structure to put them together is something called an object, or it's also known as a dictionary. So let's create this dictionary. I'm going to create this variable city data, and I'm going to create a dictionary. Dictionary in JavaScript is created using curly braces. Another challenge for beginner programmers would be to keep track of all the different brackets. Before I started programming, I hardly ever used curly braces. But in programming, they're used all across, right? So we learned about round brackets. Round braces are used for functions. Square brackets are used for lists. Curly braces are used for dictionaries. So a dictionary consists of 2 things. Each item has a key and a value. So the name of the item and the item itself. So let's say I have an item called city, and its value is San Francisco. I put comma, I put the next item, say coordinates, and I put coordinates. And coordinates of San Francisco is this. By the way, I'm not typing this out of memory. I have another screen, I'm looking at it. I don't have memory, I can remember long coordinates. And the third item that I want to put is the population. And I'm going to assign the same population. So I have this long line where I've defined the city data. And I've complete this. Let me print this and control enter to run this. Right, see the data. Whenever you make an error, so I made a typo here. All the variable names are case sensitive. They have to be typed exactly the way you defined it. I've defined the variable like this, city and data. By mistake, I said print city date, and it gave me an error. And errors are fine. Errors just tell you how to fix your code. Error is not scary. So when you get an error, don't panic. Just say, read the error, try to figure out. It's also going to tell you which line is causing the error. And if you look at it, we made a mistake here. So I'm going to print, say control enter and run this. So now this says this is an object containing 3 properties. Earlier was a list, now it's an object. Let me expand this. And now you can see each item has a key, a tag, and the value itself. Right? This is different than the list. In the list, we had index. But here we have the name of each element. So this is great for structured data. Also, when you have a long line like this, JavaScript allows you to break it down over multiple lines. So you can split your code into multiple lines. The command doesn't end till it encounters a semicolon. So this is just the command ends now. So you can easily break your code over multiple lines. This is also preferred method to write code. Generally, a lot of the coding conventions will say you should not have lines exceeding 80 characters just for better readability. So you can also write code like this. This is will work exactly the same way. Right, so we learned about variables, lists, and objects. Just a few more things to go before you are ready to use JavaScript in Earth Engine. One more thing that you'll have to do is define functions. We already used a function called print in our work. There's a built-in function provided by JavaScript and Earth Engine. You can use the built-in functions, but sometimes Earth Engine will require to create your own functions that do some processing. So functions are bits of code that take an input, use the value of the input, do some processing, and return some output. So let's define a variable, which would be a function. So let's define a very simple function called greet. The function is defined using this keyword function. It takes some input. Let's call this an input name. So this is our function called greet, and it takes one input called name, and it does something with the name, and it returns the value. So we'll say return hello plus name. Very simple function. Whatever name you give, it'll return hello plus name. Okay. Let's call this function. So the way we call print, we can call this function greet. This is the custom function. This is the one we defined. And we say greet world. Okay. So this is a function that we're calling to say, we define a function called greet. We are passing it on argument called world. And it's going to call this function. The function return hello plus world. And we want to see the output, so we can just print it. So we'll say print the output that is given by this function. And you can see it says hello world now. Okay. Let's write another line of code. I'm going to say greet readers. It says hello readers. So whatever is passed on to the function, it gets assigned to this variable name, what we have defined, and it returns hello plus that. So a function will generate different outputs based on the different inputs. And that's the beauty of functions, where you say, I know how to process one image, and you write a function saying, given an image, this is what I need to do. And then you want to process 1,000 images, you just run that function on 1,000 images. And you don't have to write the function 1,000 times. You just say, this is one function that takes an input, give me an image, I will do some processing and return the output image. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, if you want to add some comment to your code, you can use this forward double slash. So anything you start with 2 forward slashes will be a comment. So comment will be part of your code, but when you run it, nothing happens. JavaScript will just ignore it. It said, this is a comment. This is only for the user to document the things. We're not going to use that. So we can use comment to document our code. So I'm going to go back and document our code. You say, this is variables. This is a list. This is an object, or dictionary. This is a function. And this is a comment, right? So we kind of wrote comments, and the comments are completely ignored. They're not interpreted. They're useful for documenting your code. The comments are also useful to say, I don't want to run the whole script at once. I want to run only part of the script. So for this, say, I don't want to run this line, print retriever. So I can comment it and put 2 forward slashes and run it. You can see JavaScript ignore it. If I want to run it again, I uncomment it and I can get it back. So this is a great way to only run part of the code or comment out stuff that is not working yet, but you still want to get some results. If you want to comment out long blocks of code, you can say, I want to just uncomment everything before this. I want to comment out everything that came before this. So I can select this block of code, and then I can say control / or command / on Mac, control / on Windows. It's going to bulk comment this thing. So now when I run this, I only run the last part. So the way to bulk comment is control / or command / for Mac. If you want one comment, same thing, you can just select and command / again, control / again, and you're going to block and comment things. So this is a useful way to run only the piece of code that you want. Many times when one of the tasks that you will have to do is when you wrote a script and you say it was working yesterday, I did something today, it stopped working. What did I do wrong? And the way to debug is you start commenting out stuff. Say, okay, let me see if the first part works. Let me see if this part works. So you figure out which part of the code is causing the problem, and that allows you to zero in on the stuff that you need to pay more attention or fix. So using this control / to bulk comment will help you run only part of the code. Another thing that I want to briefly hint to is the convention for choosing variable names. JavaScript has this convention where the variable names should not have spaces. Of course, you cannot have spaces in variable names. In Python or other languages, you may be typing variable names like this, city_name. So if you want to define a variable called city_name, that works. JavaScript will accept it. But the convention, the standard practice is to name your variables using this convention called camel case. So if you want a variable called city name, you should write it like this. A camel case variables start with a small case letter, and each word is then capitalized. So this is your camel case, like hump of camels. This is how it's named. And this is the preferred way of defining variable names. You don't have to, but if you stick to it, your code will look consistent because all of the Earth Engine API functions also follow camel case. So when you're choosing a variable, choose a camel case variable name, which will help you your code be consistent. And that brings us to the end of this section on Introduction to JavaScript. This is all the JavaScript you need to know to use Earth Engine. This will get you from chapter 1 to chapter 54. That's it. You don't need to know any more JavaScript. Just knowing how to create variables, create lists, create dictionaries, write functions, and write comments. That's all you need in JavaScript to be able to use Earth Engine. That brings us to our end of the first section.